Hey, listener name, have you ever gotten that feeling like on a project where it just seems like someone is like missing some really important skills?
Yeah.
We're not even speaking the same language when it comes to the actual work.
Oh, yeah. I've definitely been there. Unfortunately, it's way more common than you'd think.
Right.
And it can really throw a project off track.
For sure.
Yeah.
And it always seems to come back to bite you at the absolute worst time, which is why I'm excited to dive into this project management document we've got today. It's almost like a cheat sheet for making sure every single person on your team has the skills they need to really knock it out of the park.
Yeah, it's like think of it as proactive instead of reactive. Instead of waiting till something breaks, you're like, how do we build the team so that this doesn't happen in the first place?
I love that.
Yeah.
So this document, it lays out this like 4-step process.
Yeah.
And step 1 is, get this, determine required competencies and elements of training.
Which sounds very formal and jargony.
It does, a little bit.
But all it really means is before you can even think about training, you need to be really clear on what skills are absolutely like non-negotiable for this specific project to be successful.
And we're not just talking about hard skills here, right? Like, I mean, obviously, if you're like building a website, you need someone on your team who can, actually code.
Yeah.
But it goes way beyond that.
Absolutely. And this document, it actually highlights soft skills as being equally important, if not more so. Things like communication, problem solving, even conflict resolution. Like how do you navigate disagreements within a team? Those are the skills that can truly make or break a team's ability to work well together, regardless of how amazing their technical skills are.
And listener name, I'm like emphasizing this because I've seen so many times where something that seems like a really small skill gap, like, oh, not everyone's totally comfortable with this one specific software that can turn into like massive delays and just like frustration later on.
Yeah, and that's where this next piece comes in. So the document, it really emphasizes doing what's called a gap analysis.
Okay, gap analysis, which again sounds kind of like a scary term.
A little bit, yeah.
But it's really not that complicated. Basically, you're comparing what your team is currently capable of doing with like that ideal skill set for project success.
Right, exactly.
And that difference, that gap, that's where your training opportunities are.
Exactly. It's all about figuring out, like, where do our team's current abilities, like, not quite match up to what this project actually needs.
And I love how they talk about the different training styles. They're not like everyone has to do this one thing. It's very much a let's mix and match. Let's do some formal programs. Let's do some on-the-job learning. Let's look at online resources. Find that blend that works for your team for their learning styles.
That's a really key point, I think, because one size doesn't fit all when it comes to learning.
Totally. So we've got step 1 figured out, right? We're going to define those skills we absolutely need, identify those gaps, and then explore those training options to bridge the gap. Now, once you've figured out your training needs, what's next?
Well, this is where the rubber meets the road a little bit.
Okay.
Because it's great to have all these, ideas about training, but you gotta pay for it somehow.
Yeah. Step 2 is allocate resources for training. And I will say, this document does not let you off easy when it comes to, thinking about the budget.
Right.
But it really seems to hammer home this idea of time as a resource.
Oh, absolutely. Because, you and I both have been in those project planning meetings where it's like, we'll get them the training they need, but then it's like,
if we have time,
which we never do.
Never happens.
And so this document, it really kind of pushes back against that. And it says, no, training is not an afterthought. Like, this is not something you tack on at the end. It needs to be like baked into the project plan right from the get-go.
It's like you wouldn't schedule, a product launch without figuring out how much time it takes to build the product in the first place.
Exactly. It's part of the manufacturing process, so to speak. And it's not, we're not just talking about like literally blocking off the hours on the calendar for people to go sit in a training, but also like giving them access to the right software, right? Like letting them play around with new tools, even like maybe building in dedicated time for mentorship.
I love that because I think so often it's, go learn this new thing, but also get all your other work done.
Right.
And it's like, no, we actually need to create space for learning where people feel supported in that learning, not rushed, not like stressed out that they're, behind on other stuff.
Totally. And I'm glad you brought up support because that's kind of the next piece of it.
Okay.
So we've allocated the resources, we've we've figured out, like, we're giving people the time, the money, whatever it is. How do we know if it's working? Right. That's step 3. Measure training outcomes.
Because it is. I mean, it's like any other investment.
Yeah.
Right? You kind of want to know what your return is. And this document, again, very helpful here. It's like, it's not just about, did they show up for the training?
Did they get a certificate?
Yeah, exactly. It's really about, did they actually learn anything? And more importantly, are they able to apply that knowledge?
Exactly. It's like, are they making fewer mistakes? Are they completing their tasks more efficiently?
I love that.
Are they coming up with like new innovative solutions to the problems that like we've always had?
So we're not just looking for, like, can they spit back the information they got in the training?
Yeah.
It's, are they using it in a way that's actually moving the needle?
Yes. And here's where I think it gets really interesting. They even talk about looking at behavioral changes.
What does that even mean? Like, what does that look like in the context of work? I mean, it's like we're going beyond checking boxes, right? It's getting into like the actual way people show up at work.
Yes. It's like, did the training make them a better communicator? Are they more like proactive about, finding information when they need it? Do they seem more confident tackling new challenges? All of those things, like, those are all signs that the training did something.
It's those like little shifts that actually end up making a big difference in the long run.
Yeah.
And I love how this document, it really brings it home. Like investing in your team, it's not just something you do if you have extra money lying around.
Yeah.
It's actually essential.
Yeah, it's essential for success.
It's like, it's almost like this document is saying, like, if you want your project to be a hit song,
okay,
you got to make sure your team has the right sheet music.
I love that analogy because it's not just about, like making sure they hit the right notes. It's about setting them up to really thrive, right? Like to bring their own creativity and passion to the work, and creating that environment where people are constantly learning and growing. I mean, that's huge.
It really is. It's about more than just this one project, too. You know what I mean? It's like you're building a team that's ready for anything. So, listener name, as you're thinking about your own projects, your own teams, even just like your own career, right? What's resonating with you from these 4 steps? What's one thing, just one thing, that you could put into action today? Maybe it's having a conversation with your team about what kind of training they need, or maybe it's just blocking off like an hour on your calendar to focus on your own skill building. Whatever it is, just remember, when you invest in your team's growth, you're really investing in the success of like everything, your projects, your organization, the whole 9 yards.